I figure you must be in serious trouble if the military's after you. Now that I've swung to your rescue and impressed you with my daring do, I can charge you for my services.
Charge us what? I'm nearly broke.
Seriously? I take more than just cash, you know. Don't you have any precious metals? Jewels? Rich relatives about to croak? Charity work. Wonderful. Are we there yet?
Let me ask you, what would you get if you mixed the guys who made Dig Dug and JRPGs? Don't answer that? You get Tales of Xillia. Although I am surprised at the sheer lack of shooting people in the back with a bike pump and then inflating them till they explode. Maybe they can add that as DLC. Tales of Xillia is one of the newest releases in the Tales of series, a series of action RPGs that have been around since the PS1. And while each console over the years seems to have gotten at least one Tales of release, for the most part we in North America didn't get too many. But fortunately, this one's pretty damn good. Now to start out, Tales of Xillia does something completely different than the other games in the series. You have to pick your starting character. This actually doesn't matter as much as you'd think though, because whether you pick the boy, Jude, or the girl, Mila, it really just changes the battle theme and the perspective from certain cutscenes. Jude does, however, get one fairly emotionally deep cutscene that Mila doesn't, so if you are going to pick this up, I would suggest playing as Jude for your first playthrough. His story is slightly more in-depth. The story starts off with some intrigue. Regardless of which characters you pick, the characters do meet up pretty much instantly. As a med student, Jude ends up losing a paper, finding it only to get drawn into Mila's mission, which is to invade a military facility and destroy a weapon which seems to be siphoning the power of the spirits, which could in turn destroy the world. This attempt marks them both as criminals, which means they have to travel the world to try and stop this. I meet plenty of fairly deep and interesting characters along the way, and each of these characters has a different backstory, personality, and fighting style.
How are you feeling?
I don't seem to have any strength.
Have you been eating properly?
I've never eaten.
Ever?
You've got Mila Maxwell, a 20-year-old girl who is apparently the Lord of Spirits, who reigns over the world. You have everyone's favorite Dr. Jude Mathis, who is soon to be an ex-med school student as he gets kicked out for treason. You've got your carefree mercenary Alvin, Elise, a little girl with a demonic puppet, Rowan, the obligatory kick-ass butler. There's also Leia, who is... I swear her character is just another girl in the party. I mean, you won't know this, but my first record through, I didn't even remember her as a character in the party. She's really that insubstantial, but extra character for your party, whatever.
Yeah, you get crazy origin stories like that in all these rustic towns.
How dare you! 20 years ago, I personally witnessed the advent of Lord Maxwell and the four great spirits. I saw her grow into the woman you see before you without ever taking a bite of food or a wink of sleep.
Want to tell this geezer about the time Mila collapsed from hunger?
One of the biggest things that I really like about this game, and the entire Tales of series, are the skits. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the series, skits are mini interstitial cutscenes which you activate with the select button when there's one available to you. And they fill the giant void that I feel a lot of RPGs have. I mean, what are my characters thinking and doing as I take them from fight and story mission to fight and story mission? These are little bits and slices of minutia where your characters just randomly talk about stuff. Might be story related, might be character related, might be sub-quest related. There are a few of those, and that's sort of a new thing with this game. But it's always just random stuff that your characters are talking about for the sake of just characters talking with one another. This is cool because it adds a little bit more depth to each character and a lot more personality, as well as a view on each character's relationships with one another. And for the hell of it, I'm going to throw a few more into this video just for something different, to see what I mean. Now, unlike previous Tales of games, this game doesn't have a traversable overworld. You can use it for quick traveling, but if you want to get from point A to point B initially, you're going to have to walk from area to area. This is cool because this leaves plenty of opportunity to find loot, resources, and fight enemies. And unlike a lot of other RPG series, this game doesn't rely on random battles. Nope, you see the enemy on the field, you go fight them. If they run into you from behind, you are put at a serious disadvantage in fighting. But if you get behind them, you can surprise attack them, which deals a little bit extra damage from the start. So even your adventuring has a bit of strategy to how you approach enemies, which is really cool. Now, combat is fairly similar to previous Tales of games, but like every other previous release, it always adds something. It's an action RPG whose combat is a sort of beat-em-up style, but each character plays a little bit differently. If Jude dodges an enemy's attack just as they're about to hit him, he'll jump behind the enemy to get a sneak attack in. Very useful. Mila's a bit of a red mage, she can use magic as well as swordplay. Alvin's weapons charge up, and by charging his weapons, his specials change. Elise can power her doll on and off, which changes how it fights a little bit. This game also brings back the AC system from Tales of Graces. And what this is it's essentially a number by your character's portrait which delineates their strength, how many times they can attack before they need to pause for a breather. Essentially, how long your combo can last. So you're going to want to try and optimize your combos and try and use them in conjunction with other teammates for the best effects. What's new in this game is the linking system, and this is pretty cool. Essentially what this means is you tether yourself to a teammate, and depending on which teammate you do this with will provide different effects, such as dispelling status ailments or having them break the guards of the enemies. Your teammate will always try and strafe around the enemy to get a few extra hits in, as well as try and knock the enemy off balance. Likewise, if an enemy tries to get up behind you, they'll try and defend you from behind. In addition, there's also the linked arts system, which is the bar on the left side of the screen. When you fill that bar up certain increments, you'll be capable of performing a linked art. Think something like the double text from Chrono Trigger. And if you fill the bar all the way, you go into overlimit mode. And what this means is for a short period of time until that bar drains, you have an unlimited use of your arts until the bar drains. This also means you have an unlimited use of linked arts. As well, in this overlimited state is the only time where you can perform a mystic art, your sort of crazy end battle super moves, although you don't get them until near the end. Now, while I like the linking system, I think there is a bit of a problem with it. You reap the benefits of this system, but your enemy doesn't. With the exception of, I believe, 3 boss fights near the end, you don't run into any enemies that link, which means that you're the only side of this conflict that gets this sort of perk, and that makes it a very one-sided fight, in a game that's already fairly easy, and I'll get into that in a sec. But overall, I think that the linked system is really cool for what it does, especially considering that it's a new concept that hasn't been tried before.
Alvin, why is Tipo always talking about bazongas? What does that even mean?
Oh, he finally asks. It seems you're ready to take the first steps towards becoming a man.
Why do you have to make everything so weird? Forget I even asked.
Bazongas are the burning fire at the heart of manhood.
Rowan?
Jude, there are times to play it cool, but a man who fears his own passions is no man at all.
Yes, exactly what I was trying to say.
I'm not even sure I know what we're talking about.
Then you will never know bazongas. You have to want it, Jude. You have to need it.
Then teach me about bazongas.
I can barely hear you. You have to mean it.
Teach me about bazongas!
Whoa! Don't go shouting things like that!
Don't scold him, Leia. I read about this in a book. It's called Puberty. We're supposed to be understanding and supportive.
I should probably also talk about the leveling. Now, your characters level in a very standard way, get enough experience and you can level your character, but it also has a sort of secondary leveling with the Lilium orbs. And this is sort of similar to the system found in Final Fantasy XIII. And I know that sounds horrific, I know, I'm there with you, but it's not that bad. You are given this grid with different stat ups, and you spend points you earn through leveling on each stat up. if you manage to fill out one square of the grid by capturing each corner of it with your ability ups, you'll gain a new skill or technique, which you can apply later. Some of these affect teammates, some of these are just personal buffs, others are special stuff. I like that, unlike something like Final Fantasy XIII, you are given at least a certain amount of choice in what stats you want to build. Granted, once you want to expand your grid, you do need to go and get all the other abilities, some of which are kind of useless for certain characters, but it's still pretty cool.
Beautiful view. I bet if I yelled really loud, it would echo back.
So why not try it? You gotta do things like that while you're still young. When you get to be my age, it can get a little embarrassing.
Yeah, all right, why not? Echo!
Echo, 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 echo.
Alvin,
Alvin, Alvin, Alvin, Alvin.
and what you're doing now isn't embarrassing?
A little, a little, a little, a little.
The voice acting is well done. I do think, however, that the voice direction is a little bit spotty. There are a few lines that feel like they're being delivered a little bit flatter than they should be. And one thing that stuck out with me is the voice direction for the character Mila. She has a little bit of a lisp, and I know that's a weird thing to nitpick, but just hear me out here. It's a put-on for the character, which I would say is to show her speech development since she has no contact with humans for her entire life. And that's totally cool. In fact, by the end, she gets rid of it entirely to sort of show her growth. But there are points in the middle of the game where she has it on and off, and there's certain cutscenes where she doesn't and then does. And it just seemed weird and not terribly consistent. And that really stuck out with me. I know it's a small thing, it is, but that really did stick out with me.
Go after you left the shrine in Neokara.
That's a secret for grown-ups.
It sounds like you're trying to hide something.
Figured that out, did you? Do you want to ask what I was doing?
If you don't want to tell me, that's fine.
If it's fine with you, then I ain't telling.
You don't want to tell me?
You don't want to ask?
I'm starting to think I'd rather not know.
I'm starting to think you're probably right.
The character and world designs are pretty cool. I do like this. Like other Tales of games, you can swap out your character's outfits, and while there seems to be a substantially lower number of costumes for your characters this time around, unless you go buy the DLC, which I did once just because it was my favorite character, but unless you count the DLC, which is basically a cash grab, there are very few outfits. Each character gets 3, which is substantially fewer than previous Tales of games. However, to compensate for this, and this is something that's pretty cool, you get different fashion items and accessories through various side quests, as well as just finding them in treasure chests. And you can use these to modify your character's appearance. And while some of them don't work terribly well for your character model in a lot of poses, it's a cool way to add some more personality to your characters, so I totally approve of that. That's cool. But more costumes. Come on. And don't make me pay for them. Now this game is substantially easier than previous iterations. I should know I played through this game twice now. I have very little difficulty playing through this game. And that's not a sign that I'm just good at these games, because I actually played this game with a little bit of a handicap for the hell of it. Just new experience, right? I decided for this playthrough I wasn't going to buy any weapons or items. All of my equipment and items I was going to either get from enemy drops or from treasure chests. And this is one of the biggest flaws to this game, is with the exception of one character who leaves and then rejoins the party, and I'll get to that at a point too, there is no new equipment to be found lying around or dropped from enemies. All of them are received by upgrading shops and then purchasing it from them. So I ran through the entire game, unwittingly, equipped with all the basic equipment, with the exception of, at the very end, when there's a sort of endgame side quest which gets some really, really powerful gear. But if you're having trouble and you want new equipment, you're going to have to upgrade a shop and then buy it. And to upgrade the shop, you have to essentially donate items to raise the shop's value, which is essentially shorthand for you're going to be grinding for a lot of meaningless items just to sacrifice to shops, which artificially lengthens gameplay, and I didn't like that. That was something that honestly didn't affect me, but it's not something that I enjoyed. I think that that's a really bad system. The only other major complaint I have with this game is a little bit of the story. And this is a bit of a spoiler warning, so skip ahead 10 seconds or something. Like pretty much every other Tales of game, there is a turncoat character. But unlike something like Tales of Symphonia, it's not played subtly. It's very overt that this person isn't exactly on the level. What's worse is they leave your team, then join your team. Leave your team, join your team. That happens about 6 times, and it seems to abandon all plot just for this small subplot that you know is going to be resolved in 10 minutes. Until they realize that they actually had an interesting plot with interesting characters and get back to that, but that takes the front seat for a little while. I thought that was just really lousy storytelling. Beyond that, the story's excellent. It deals with themes of growth, humanity, both on the macro and micro scale. It deals with maturation. It deals with identity. The story is fairly powerful in terms of the themes it's trying to get across, and honestly, well, I don't think this is the strongest Tales of story, or even the best one in the series. It certainly ranks up there. You can pick this up on the PS3 and Atari 2600, minus one of those things. And if you like action RPGs, or JRPGs, I'd suggest checking it out. It's pretty good.